5 years. 5 long years of silence, of missed birthdays, broken promises, and endless regret. Adrian Hale, a billionaire who could control the world, couldn't control this, losing his only son. And then, one rainy night, at a lonely bus station, he sees him. Ethan, standing there, alive, but running from danger. One look, and everything changes. Will he save his son or lose him forever? This is not just a story. It's a piece of someone's hidden pain, quietly waiting to be heard. In today's story, we dive into a moment that can change everything, in the most unexpected way. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Canada? The US? Norway? Let us know in the comments, because stories may begin anywhere, but they connect us all. Stay with us until the very end, because sometimes what breaks your heart can also heal it. And if you believe stories can change lives, hit subscribe. Join our journey. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Your voice matters here. The clock in the Grand Marble Hall ticked softly, echoing in the silence of a house too big for one man. Adrian Hale, once the man everyone admired, feared, and envied, sat slumped in a leather chair by the window. His empire stretched across continents, his fortune could move markets, but his heart was hollow. 5 years. 5 long years since he had last seen his only son Ethan. It wasn't the kind of separation caused by distance, but the kind born of pride, broken promises, and words thrown in anger that could never be taken back. Ethan had walked out at 19, determined to live on his own terms. Adrian, blinded by arrogance, let him go. He thought his son would come crawling back. But he didn't. Not after a month, not after a year, not even after 5. What haunted Adrian most wasn't just the absence of his son, it was the silence. No calls, no letters, not even a rumor. It was as if Ethan had been swallowed by the world. And so, every night, Adrian left the seat across the dining table empty. His servants whispered about it, wondering why their employer, the ruthless, untouchable billionaire, never let anyone sit there. Tonight, a storm brewed outside, rain lashing against the window, the sky dark as his regret. Adrian swirled the wine in his glass, staring at his reflection in the crimson liquid. He had built skyscrapers, carved his name into history, but none of it filled the void his son left behind. Until the call came. A driver, frantic and breathless, had phoned his assistant. "Sir, you're not going to believe this. At the central bus station, I swear I saw a young man who looked just like Ethan. He was standing there drenched in the rain, holding a worn-out backpack. He wasn't in a car, sir. He was just waiting." Adrian's glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the floor. His heart thundered. After 5 years of silence, could it really be him? Or was it just another cruel trick of fate? Adrian grabbed his coat, his driver scrambling after him. For the first time in years, the billionaire wasn't racing toward a deal or a boardroom. He was racing toward the possibility of redemption, or the fear of disappointment. And as his limousine cut through the rain, Adrian whispered a prayer he hadn't said since Ethan was a boy. "Please, God, let it be my son." The limousine carved its way through the storm, wipers thrashing against sheets of rain that blurred the city lights. Adrian Hale sat rigid in the back seat, his fists clenched on his knees. His reflection stared back at him in the darkened window, a man in his 50s with silvered hair, sharp features softened only by exhaustion. For years, he had been the face of power. But tonight, he looked like something else entirely. A father chasing a ghost. Every second stretched longer than the last. His chest tightened with each beat of the clock above the dashboard. What if it wasn't Ethan? What if the driver had only seen a resemblance, a mirage conjured by Adrian's longing? "Sir, we're close," his chauffeur said cautiously. Adrian gave a stiff nod, his throat dry. He hadn't prepared for this moment. How could he? He had rehearsed apologies in his mind for years, but they always fell flat. What words could mend the rift of pride and silence that had kept father and son apart? The limousine screeched to a halt before the central bus station, its neon sign flickering against the rain. The place looked old, tired, nothing like the grand airports and private lounges Adrian was used to. Crowds moved in and out under umbrellas, shoulders hunched, their lives stitched together by schedules and exhaustion. And then he saw him. There by the far bench near the bus bay stood a young man. His hair was damp, clinging to his forehead. His clothes were plain, worn at the edges, and slung across his back was a backpack that looked as though it had carried the weight of more than just books. Adrian's breath caught in his throat. It was him. Ethan. 5 years had passed, but a father's eyes knew. The line of his jaw, the curve of his shoulders. It was the boy he once cradled, the boy he once pushed away. Except he wasn't a boy anymore. Ethan had the posture of someone who had fought battles no one had witnessed. Adrian stepped out of the car, rain immediately soaking through his tailored coat. He hardly noticed. His polished shoes splashed through puddles as he moved toward the bench, his heart pounding louder than the storm itself. "Ethan," he whispered, though the wind snatched the word away. But Ethan didn't turn. He stood with his hands shoved into his pockets, staring at the arrival board as if waiting for something, or someone. Adrian froze a few steps away, his throat constricting. What if Ethan wasn't here for him? What if he had come for someone else, or worse, what if he didn't want to be found at all? Memories clawed at him. The last argument, the slammed door, the silence that followed. Adrian's hand trembled as he reached out, but stopped just short of touching his son's shoulder. The fear was unbearable, the fear that Ethan would look at him not with love, not even with anger, but with indifference. The storm roared around them, lightning splitting the sky, and then at last Ethan turned. His eyes met Adrian's, and they were filled with something Adrian had not expected at all. Not anger, not relief, but pain. For a moment time stood still. The storm, the neon lights, the chatter of strangers moving about. All of it faded into nothingness. All Adrian could see were those eyes, Ethan's eyes, the same shade of stormy gray as his late mother's, but sharper now, older. They carried shadows, stories untold, burdens too heavy for a 24-year-old. Ethan. Adrian's voice broke, the name escaping like a plea. He hadn't spoken it aloud in so long, it felt foreign on his tongue. Ethan didn't reply. His lips pressed into a thin line, his expression unreadable. He stood tall, shoulders squared as if bracing for impact. Adrian had expected anger, maybe even an outburst, but silence cut deeper. Adrian stepped closer, rain dripping down his face like tears he refused to shed. It's me. It's your father? The words sounded pitiful, fragile, as though he were a stranger begging to be recognized. Ethan finally spoke, his voice rough, low, carrying an edge sharpened by years away. I know who you are. The answer pierced through Adrian's chest. Not because of what Ethan said, but how he said it. With no warmth, no longing. Just acknowledgement. Adrian swallowed hard. I've looked for you everywhere. Do you know what these years have been like for me? Ethan's jaw tightened. No. Because while you were looking for me, I was out there trying to survive without you. The words landed like a blow. Adrian staggered inwardly. Guilt wrapped around him, suffocating. I was wrong, he admitted, his voice trembling. I was a fool to let you walk away that night. I thought you'd come back. I thought you needed time. Ethan gave a bitter laugh, though his eyes were anything but amused. Time? Dad. 5 years isn't time. It's a lifetime. Do you have any idea where I've been, what I've been through? Adrian opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He realized with horror that he truly didn't know. His billions, his reach, his resources, they had all failed him in the one place that mattered most. A bus screeched into the station, its headlights casting a harsh glow on Ethan's face. Adrian noticed then. The backpack was frayed, the straps worn thin, the soles of Ethan's shoes splitting at the edges. His son had lived hard, raw, unprotected. And Adrian hadn't been there to stop it. Why are you here? Adrian finally asked, his voice almost a whisper, as if afraid of the answer. Ethan looked past him, toward the road beyond the station, his expression unreadable again. Because sometimes, he said slowly, you end up where you never wanted to be. Adrian's chest tightened. Ethan, please. Come home. Whatever happened, we can fix it. Ethan's gaze snapped back to him, cold and sharp. Home? You mean that palace of glass and lies? I didn't come here for you, Dad. The words sliced through the storm. Adrian's heart sank. His son was here, after 5 years, but not for him. Adrian stood frozen, his expensive coat clinging heavily to his shoulders, drenched with rain. The words Ethan had spoken. I didn't come here for you, Dad. Echoed in his head, louder than the thunder rolling across the sky. For 5 years he had imagined this reunion 1,000 ways, his son running into his arms, shouting, crying, maybe even punching him in the chest for all the pain he had caused. But not this. Not the cold dismissal, not the emptiness in Ethan's tone. Then why? Adrian asked, his voice rough, breaking through the storm. Why are you here, standing at this station? Why now? After all this time? Ethan's eyes flickered. For a second, the mask of anger slipped, replaced by something else. Hesitation, fear, even pain. He gripped the strap of his backpack tighter, his knuckles pale in the glow of the streetlights. That's none of your business, Ethan muttered, turning slightly as though to walk away. Panic surged through Adrian. He reached out instinctively, his hand hovering inches from his son's arm, but not daring to touch. Don't say that. Please. You disappeared for 5 years, Ethan. You cut me out of your life, and I let you. I'll never forgive myself for that. But don't do this again. Don't walk away without telling me what's going on. The younger man's chest rose and fell sharply. His lips trembled before he pressed them into a hard line. For a heartbeat, Adrian thought Ethan might break down, that he might finally open the door to his pain. But instead, Ethan shook his head. You wouldn't understand, he said, the words low but sharp. You never did. That's why I left. Adrian's throat burned. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, to remind his son of the sacrifices he had made to give him everything. But as he stared at Ethan, the dark circles under his eyes, the hollow cheeks, the weight he carried in silence, Adrian realized that money meant nothing to the boy standing before him. Ethan hadn't needed skyscrapers or private jets. He had needed his father. "I'll understand," Adrian whispered. "Just try me." Ethan's gaze locked on him then, intense and searching, as if trying to decide whether to trust the man who had failed him once before. Rain streaked down his face, mingling with something that looked dangerously close to tears. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice raw. "I came back because I had nowhere else to go. And because—" He stopped, swallowing hard. His words seemed to stick in his throat. Adrian leaned closer, his heart pounding. "Because what?" Ethan's lips trembled again before he forced the words out. "Because someone's after me." The air seemed to freeze around them. Adrian's chest constricted. "After you? What do you mean? Who?" Ethan's eyes darted toward the shadows at the edge of the station, scanning as though expecting someone to emerge. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I can't stay here. I can't stay with you. If they find me, they'll hurt you too." Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating Ethan's face, haunted, terrified, and utterly vulnerable. Adrian felt the ground shift beneath him. This wasn't just a reunion. This was the beginning of something darker. The words, "Someone's after me," echoed in Adrian's ears, louder than the storm pounding the pavement. He stared at his son, his only son, whose eyes darted like a hunted animal's. For the first time, Adrian realized that Ethan wasn't just distant or angry. He was afraid. Adrian swallowed hard. "Ethan, who's after you? Tell me. I'll protect you." Ethan shook his head violently, stepping back as if the very thought of staying near Adrian might endanger him. "You don't understand, Dad. This isn't a business negotiation you can throw money at. These people don't care about your power or your empire. They're dangerous." Adrian felt a flash of anger, not at his son, but at the invisible threat hanging over him. He had spent a lifetime crushing rivals in boardrooms, dismantling enemies with strategy and resources. But this was different. This was his child, dangerous or not. Adrian said firmly, his voice rising above the storm, "You're still my son. If someone's after you, they'll have to go through me first." Ethan's jaw clenched, water dripping from his hair. He looked older than his years, worn down by battles Adrian hadn't been there to fight. "That's exactly why I stayed away," Ethan whispered bitterly. "You don't know how to stop. You don't know how to not fight. I couldn't drag you into this." Adrian's heart twisted. He wanted to argue, but Ethan's trembling hands betrayed how real the threat was. His son was not just being dramatic. He was running from something, or someone, that could shatter them both. Another bus screeched into the station, drowning their words in a roar of engines and slamming brakes. People rushed past them with umbrellas and luggage, their faces blurred in the rain. Adrian suddenly noticed Ethan's eyes flick toward the crowd, scanning nervous. "Are they here?" Adrian demanded in a hushed voice. "Is someone watching you right now?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, his hand gripped the strap of his backpack tighter, his knuckles white, his breaths quickening. He looked like a soldier cornered in enemy territory. Adrian's instincts screamed. He turned, scanning the sea of faces moving through the station. Most were tired travelers soaked from the storm. But then he saw them. Two men, standing still while everyone else moved. Dark coats, no luggage, their eyes fixed in one direction. Toward Ethan, Adrian's chest tightened. He recognized the look. Predators. "Ethan," Adrian whispered urgently, grabbing his son's arm this time. "We need to leave. Now." Oh, Ethan's eyes widened. "You saw them too." Adrian gave a sharp nod. "Come with me. My car's right outside." For a split second, Ethan hesitated, torn between distrust of the man who had let him down and the need for protection from the shadows chasing him. Then, without a word, he let Adrian pull him toward the limousine. But as they hurried through the rain, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that those men weren't strangers. No, there was something eerily familiar about them. Something that clawed at the back of his memory. And when he glanced back over his shoulder, one of the men gave a slight nod, an acknowledgement, almost a warning. Adrian's blood ran cold. This wasn't random. Whoever was after Ethan, they knew Adrian too. The limousine door slammed shut behind them, and the sound of rain was replaced by the low hum of the engine. Inside, the world felt muted, insulated from the chaos outside. But Adrian could still feel it, the weight of those men's stares pressing against his back, like invisible shackles he couldn't escape. Ethan sat across from him, pressed against the farthest corner of the leather seat, his soaked clothes clinging to him. He looked exhausted, but his eyes never stopped scanning the tinted windows, as though the shadows might slip through at any moment. Adrian studied him in silence. His son's face had changed sharper lines, wariness etched into the corners of his mouth, a guardedness in his eyes that no 24-year-old should carry. He wasn't the carefree boy who used to sneak cookies from the kitchen late at night. He was someone scarred by the world, a world Adrian hadn't protected him from. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice heavy. "Ethan, tell me who they are. Please." Ethan's gaze flickered, then dropped to the backpack in his lap. His fingers tightened on the worn fabric as though it were the only thing keeping him grounded. You wouldn't believe me if I did. Try me. Adrian leaned forward, desperation in his tone. I don't care if they're criminals, debt collectors, or something worse. I just need to know what I'm up against. What you're up against. Well, for a moment, Ethan's mask slipped. His lip quivered, his eyes glassed with unspoken words. But just as quickly, he looked away, shutting himself off again. You can't fix this, Dad, Ethan whispered. Not everything in this world can be bought, controlled, or destroyed. That's why I stayed away. Because I knew you'd try. Adrian's chest tightened, guilt gnawing at him. How many times had his empire taught him to solve problems by domination, by force, by wealth? And here was his son, who wanted none of that, who needed something Adrian had failed to give: presence, understanding, love. The car pulled away from the bus station, the city lights blurring past the rain-streaked windows. For the first time in years, Adrian felt powerless. He couldn't read the situation like a contract, couldn't strategize his way out like a hostile takeover. This was personal, messy, fragile. And yet, he couldn't let go. Not again. He reached across the seat, his hand trembling slightly. Ethan, listen to me. I don't care what you've done or who's chasing you. You're my son. And if there's danger, then it's mine too. Whatever this is, we face it together. Ethan's eyes met his, and for a flicker of a moment, something shifted. The coldness melted, replaced by raw vulnerability. The boy Adrian once knew, peeking through the cracks of the hardened man. But before Adrian could breathe relief, Ethan's gaze darted past him toward the rear window. His body stiffened. They followed us. Adrian twisted around. Through the blur of rain and city lights, headlights glowed too steadily, too close. A black sedan trailed the limousine, matching its every turn. Adrian's pulse thundered. This wasn't paranoia. It was pursuit. Ethan clutched his backpack tighter, whispering under his breath like a prayer. I told you, Dad. They won't stop. And for the first time in his life, Adrian Hale, the man who feared nothing, felt the chill of helplessness crawl up his spine. The limousine sped through the slick city streets, tires hissing against the rain-soaked asphalt. Inside, silence reigned, broken only by the thundering of Adrian's heartbeat in his ears. He couldn't take his eyes off the black sedan behind them, its headlights glowing like twin predators stalking prey. Drive faster. Adrian barked, his voice sharp with urgency. Yes, sir, the chauffeur replied, pressing the accelerator. The engine roared, and the limousine surged forward, but the sedan stayed close, weaving effortlessly through traffic as though tethered to them. Ethan gripped his backpack tighter, his knuckles bone-white, his breathing quickened, shallow, uneven. For a moment, Adrian wasn't staring at a grown man. He was staring at his frightened child again, the boy who used to crawl into his bed during thunderstorms. And the thought tore him apart. Ethan, Adrian said, trying to steady his voice. I need you to trust me. Tell me who they are. Tell me what they want. Ethan's eyes darted from the window to his father, then back again. His lips parted, but the words seemed to choke him. Finally, he whispered, They don't just want me, Dad. They want what I'm carrying. He patted the battered backpack in his lap, clutching it like a lifeline. Adrian frowned. What's in there? Ethan shook his head. Not here, not now? His voice cracked, a mixture of fear and resolve. All you need to know is it's the only reason I'm still alive. Before Adrian could press further, the black sedan accelerated, closing the gap between them. The glare of its headlights filled the limousine's interior. Adrian's gut twisted. This wasn't intimidation. This was preparation. They're going to ram us. Adrian realized aloud, gripping the edge of his seat. The chauffeur swerved hard, the limousine jerking violently. Ethan slammed into the seat, his backpack nearly tumbling to the floor. The screech of metal echoed as the sedan clipped their rear bumper. Adrian's fury boiled. Whoever these people were, they were willing to risk everything in the open, on city streets, just to get to his son. He wanted to shout at them, to drag them out of their car and end this madness. But all he could do was sit and watch, powerless, as his world threatened to unravel again. Dad? Ethan's voice broke through his thoughts, desperate. You should have left me. They won't stop until they have it. Being near me puts you in danger. Adrian turned to him, eyes blazing. Don't ever say that again. You're my son. You think I'd let them take you without a fight? His voice trembled, not with fear but with something deeper. Regret, love, desperation, all tangled together. The sedan rammed them again, harder this time. Glass rattled, and the chauffeur fought to keep the limousine under control. Hang on, the driver shouted, swerving into a narrower street. The limousine lurched, sending both father and son crashing against the seats. Adrian reached out, steadying Ethan, his hand gripping his son's shoulder. For the first time in years, there was no anger between them, no pride, no distance. Only survival. The sedan was still there, its headlights a merciless shadow in the storm. Adrian's mind raced. He had resources, security teams, private investigators, safe houses. But right now, none of them mattered. All that mattered was the boy in front of him. As another sharp turn threw the limousine into the darkness of an empty side street, Ethan's whisper cut through the chaos, trembling and raw. "If they catch me, Dad, I don't think either of us will live to see tomorrow." The limousine finally skidded to a stop in the shadow of an abandoned warehouse at the edge of the city. Rain streamed down in torrents, soaking Adrian to the bone. He jumped out, yanking the door open for Ethan, who hesitated for a brief moment before following. Adrian's gaze swept the empty street, every shadow a potential threat. But even amid the fear, the longing that had tormented him for 5 years bubbled to the surface. Here was his son, alive, trembling, yet standing beside him. Every step toward Ethan, Adrian felt a lifetime of missed birthdays, broken promises, and endless regret pressing on his chest. "Ethan," he said softly, his voice almost breaking, "you don't have to face this alone anymore. Whatever's in that backpack, whatever it is, we'll handle it together." Ethan's eyes glimmered with a mix of fear and frustration. He looked at Adrian as if measuring whether the man in front of him could really protect him, or if it was too late to try. Finally, with a shuddering breath, he unzipped the backpack and slowly pulled out a small, reinforced case. Adrian froze. The case was locked, metal edges glinting in the dim streetlights, but he didn't need to see inside to sense its importance. The air around them seemed to thrum with danger. "They're after this," Ethan said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I found it 5 years ago and I've been running ever since." Adrian swallowed hard. "What is it?" Ethan shook his head. "You wouldn't understand. Not yet." He paused, glancing toward the dark streets as if expecting the black sedan to burst through any second. "It's information. Proof. Evidence that could destroy people. The kind of people who will kill to protect themselves." Adrian's mind raced. He had built empires, faced blackmail, hostile takeovers, corporate espionage, but this was different. This wasn't about money or power. It was about life and death, and his son, the boy he had abandoned in his own pride, had been carrying it alone all these years. The weight of realization slammed into him. Ethan had suffered, fought, and survived while Adrian had been lost in his luxury, thinking success could fill the void that only a father could. "Why didn't you tell me?" Adrian whispered, his voice trembling. "You could have had help. We could have." "I couldn't," Ethan interrupted, eyes fierce now, even through exhaustion. "If anyone knew, they'd find me. They've been hunting me for 5 years. I couldn't risk you. I couldn't risk anyone." Adrian's chest ached, guilt and horror clawing at him. He wanted to pull Ethan into his arms, to apologize, to promise protection. But the danger was far from over. A sound of tires scraping on wet asphalt made them both spin. The black sedan had found them again, emerging from the shadows, moving like death incarnate. Ethan clutched the case tighter, fear and determination warring in his gaze. Adrian stepped closer, placing a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "We face this together. No more running." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the two men in the sedan. One of them raised a hand pointing directly at Ethan. Adrian's jaw tightened. His son was carrying the key to a war, one that neither of them could have anticipated. And as the rain fell harder, Adrian realized the fight for his son's life, and his own, was only just beginning. The rain hammered down with relentless fury, turning the abandoned warehouse lot into a slick mirror of light and shadow. Adrian and Ethan crouched behind the limousine, their breaths shallow, hearts thundering like war drums. The black sedan had circled, now blocking both escape routes. The two men inside remained motionless, like predators assessing their prey. "Dada." Ethan's voice was low, almost a whisper, trembling with fear he could no longer hide. "I told you they won't stop." Adrian turned to him, wet hair plastered to his forehead, eyes burning with a mix of anger and desperation. "Then we make sure they can't." Ethan looked at his father incredulously. 5 years of running, of solitude and terror, had trained him to survive alone. And now Adrian, the man who had abandoned him emotionally for so long, was ready to stand beside him. A flicker of hope mingled with fear. The two men in the sedan emerged, stepping into the rain like shadows given flesh. Their eyes never left Ethan. Adrian noticed their posture, disciplined, practiced, the kind of calm that came with ruthless training. These weren't mere criminals, they were professionals. "Give us the case." One of the men barked, voice cutting through the storm like a blade. "And maybe you walk away alive." Ethan tightened his grip on the small, reinforced case, defiance sparking in his eyes. "You'll have to take it from me." Adrian felt a surge of protective rage. 5 years of guilt, of lost chances, of silent nights wondering where his son was. He channeled it all into the next moment. "Back off," he said, his voice low but unyielding. "You don't touch him." The men smirked, taking a step closer. The closer they came, the more Adrian realized something chilling. They knew exactly who Ethan was, and exactly how much Adrian would risk to protect him. Ethan glanced at his father, the unspoken question in his eyes, "Can we do this together?" Adrian nodded subtly. No words, they didn't need words. Then, With a sudden move that startled even Adrian, Ethan swung the backpack forward like a shield, slamming it into one of the men. Rain splashed around them. Adrian lunged, grabbing the second man in a tight hold, twisting him sideways. The fight was messy, chaotic, and brief. Adrian's years of controlled power were useless against raw aggression, but his determination to protect his son made him unstoppable. Ethan, though smaller, moved with a precision born of fear and survival, landing blows that staggered their assailants. Lightning illuminated the final moments. Adrian blocked a knife swipe aimed at Ethan, twisting violently and sending the man sprawling into a puddle. The first man scrambled, fear flickering across his face for the first time. Adrian's chest heaved, rain running into his eyes, mixing with sweat and tears. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence fell. The men retreated to their sedan, realizing this battle was lost for now. The engine roared as they sped off, leaving Adrian and Ethan soaked, bruised, but alive. Adrian sank to his knees, clutching Ethan close. "You're safe. You're safe now," he whispered repeatedly, voice raw with emotion. Ethan leaned into him, shivering, exhausted, tears streaking his face. "I didn't think you'd come," he admitted. "I'm here," Adrian said, holding him tighter. "And I won't leave again. Never again." But as the rain fell and the echo of tires faded, Adrian knew the battle wasn't over. Whoever had sent those men would return, and next time, they wouldn't hesitate. And somewhere deep in the shadows watching, a figure smiled. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the tension inside Adrian's private safe house was suffocating. Ethan sat at the edge of a leather sofa, the reinforced case resting on the floor beside him, still trembling from the encounter. Adrian paced, his mind racing, heart pounding, not from exertion but from fear and guilt. "Ethan," Adrian said finally, stopping in front of him, "you've carried this alone for 5 years. Why? Why didn't you come to me sooner?" Ethan's gaze met his father's, sharp and unyielding. "Because I knew you'd try to fix everything with money, with influence, with your empire. But this isn't something money can save." Adrian felt the sting of truth in that statement. He had thought he could shield his son with wealth, but wealth was useless against something that hid in shadows, that moved in whispers and threats. "What is in that case?" Adrian asked, his voice soft now, almost pleading. Ethan hesitated. His fingers trembled on the latch of the case. Slowly he opened it, revealing a stack of documents, flash drives and small devices, each tagged meticulously with names, dates, and codes. Adrian's eyes widened. The contents weren't just evidence. They were explosive, capable of toppling corporations, governments, and lives built on lies. "These people," Ethan said, his voice breaking, "they killed to protect this. And they've been after me ever since I found it." Adrian took a deep breath, realizing the enormity of what his son had been carrying. Not just the physical weight, but the burden of fear, isolation, and survival. He sank into the sofa beside Ethan, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've been brave, braver than anyone I know, and I failed you by not being here." Ethan swallowed hard, a mix of shame and relief flickering across his face. "You weren't here, Dad. I didn't want anyone else hurt. I thought I could handle it alone. But I can't. Not anymore." Adrian's eyes hardened. "Then we handle it together. Starting now." He rose, pacing again, formulating a plan. "First, we secure this evidence. Then we track down who's behind this. And then we make them pay." The Ethan looked at him, incredulous. "You really think we can? After everything? They've been hunting me for 5 years." "I don't care," Adrian said firmly. "I don't care how powerful they are, or how long they've been coming. You're my son, and I swear I won't let them take you, or this, from us." For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself a glimmer of hope. He leaned against his father, drawing strength from his presence. It wasn't just protection he felt. It was a connection that had been severed and was now slowly knitting itself back together. But as Adrian glanced out the rain-streaked window, his chest tightened. Somewhere in the shadows beyond the city, someone was watching, waiting, calculating, and they wouldn't stop until the case, or Ethan was gone. Lightning flashed, illuminating the darkened streets outside. In that instant, Adrian knew one truth: the final confrontation was coming. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, casting long, fragile rays across the safe house. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a city washed clean, but inside, Adrian and Ethan sat in tense silence, the small reinforced case between them. The danger hadn't vanished, it had only been momentarily held at bay. Yet something had shifted, something deeper than survival, something neither of them had felt in years' connection. Adrian broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "Ethan, whatever happens today, whatever they try, we face it together. No more running, no more hiding." Ethan's hands rested on the case, fingers trembling. "I've been alone for so long, Dad. I've been scared. Every day, every night, wondering if this would be the day they caught me." His voice cracked, revealing the boy beneath the armor he had worn for years. "And now I don't have to be." Adrian reached across, taking Ethan's hand in his own. You never had to be. Not alone. Not ever. I failed you, Ethan, but I swear, never again. I will protect you. Always. A tear slipped down Ethan's cheek, and Adrian felt a sharp pang of regret and relief intertwined. 5 years of separation, of silence, of pride and fear, culminated in this fragile moment of reconciliation. He pulled Ethan into an embrace, and for the first time in half a decade, they held each other not as a billionaire and a son, not as a strange father and wary child, but simply as father and son. Suddenly, the faintest sound of tires on wet pavement echoed outside. Both of them froze. The black sedan had returned. Persistent, relentless, but now Adrian wasn't paralyzed by fear. He felt a surge of determination. Stay behind me, he instructed, sliding the case into a secure satchel. His mind raced through contingencies, escape routes, and the networks he could call in minutes. This was no longer about pride or business strategy. It was raw protection, instinctual, uncompromising. The door burst open. The two men from the sedan stepped inside, confident, expecting the terror of a trapped prey. Instead, they met the gaze of a father who had spent 5 years losing his son, and a son who had spent 5 years surviving without him. Adrian didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, voice calm but steel-edged. Leave, walk away, or you'll regret it. Ethan, for the first time, didn't flinch. He stood beside his father, hand on the satchel, ready. The fear that had dominated him for years faltered, replaced by a fierce resolve he had inherited from Adrian, tempered with his own survival-honed courage. The men paused, sizing up the unbreakable bond between father and son. Then, silently, they retreated, realizing that this wasn't just a fight of muscle or weapons. It was a fight of hearts. A fight that they could not win. When the door clicked shut behind them, Adrian let out a long breath, the first true exhale of relief in years. Ethan sank against him, exhausted, trembling. But alive, Adrian cupped his son's face, tracing the contours he had longed to see again. 5 years, he whispered. I'll never let you stand alone again. Ethan's lips curved into a small, fragile smile. I believe you, Dad. Outside, the sun rose, illuminating a city cleansed by storm. Inside, a father and son stood together, scarred but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next together. For the first time in 5 long years, the empty seat at the dining table had meaning again, and Adrian cried. Not from fear, not from loss, but from the sheer, uncontainable relief of finally finding his son, and finally being found in return. The storm had passed, but the bond they had reclaimed would weather anything.
After 5 years of silence, billionaire Adrian Hale finally sees his estranged son, Ethan, standing alone at a rainy bus station. The reunion is cut short by danger. Someone is hunting Ethan, and the secret he carries could destroy lives. As father and son confront fear, betrayal, and the past, they must face the storm together. This is a story of lost time, unspoken love, and a bond tested by life and death.